There are moments in public life when everything collapses at once. Not gradually, not like a slow leak from a cracked wall, but all at once, like a building that seemed perfectly fine from the outside but had been quietly rotting from within for years. And right now, in the year 2025 and into 2026, the Sussex story, the grand, cinematic, self-written narrative of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, is experiencing exactly that kind of collapse. The IRS is knocking at the door of Archewell. Netflix just quietly walked away. Meghan's jam is literally being given away for free at a streaming giant's Los Angeles office. And through all of this, standing at what seems like a perfectly safe and very intentional distance is Prince William, and according to Piers Morgan, he may have been playing the long game this entire time. Welcome back. If you're new here, buckle up because today we are going deep. We're going to unpack every single layer of this story, from the IRS probe that has journalists and charity watchdogs in an absolute frenzy, to the Netflix deal that started at $100 million and ended with boxes of unsold jam sitting in storage rooms. We're going to talk about what Piers Morgan actually said about Prince William's moves, why royal experts are now calling William one of the most strategically intelligent figures in modern British public life, and what all of this means for the future of Harry and Meghan's brand, their finances, their charity, and frankly, their entire reason for leaving the royal family in the first place. So pour yourself a coffee, or hey, maybe some jam on toast, and let's get into it. Let's start with the man who never shuts up about any of this and, to be fair, is usually right more often than people want to admit. Piers Morgan. Now, love him or hate him, and the internet seems to do both with equal passion, there's no denying that Piers Morgan has a front-row seat to this entire drama. He has spoken to people in the royal circles, he has followed this story obsessively for years, and when he makes a prediction about Harry and Meghan, there's a habit the universe seems to have of proving him right within a few months. What Piers Morgan recently revealed about Prince William is not some dramatic conspiracy theory or a tabloid fabrication. It's actually a fairly cool, calculated observation about how Prince William has chosen to handle one of the most complicated situations any future king has ever faced, the public, ongoing rebellion of his only brother. And here's what makes it remarkable. William didn't fight back. He didn't go on TV. He didn't leak to the press. He didn't write a book. He didn't give tearful interviews to Oprah Winfrey. What William did was something far more powerful and far more difficult to defend against. He simply continued to be exactly what a future king should be. He was present. He was dignified. He was consistent. And in doing so, he allowed the contrast between himself and the Sussexes to do all the talking. Piers Morgan has been saying for a long time that this was William's strategy, not to attack, but to endure. Not to strike, but to wait. Not to argue, but to let reality make the argument for him. And if we look at what is happening to Harry and Meghan right now in real time, it is very hard to argue that the strategy is not working. But let's be precise about what Piers Morgan actually revealed. According to Morgan's commentary and analysis, available across multiple platforms and in multiple interviews, he has pointed to several specific moves that Prince William has made or is in the process of making that signal a deliberate, carefully structured repositioning of the monarchy around him and Catherine. First, William has reportedly been actively involved in discussions about the future structure of the royal family, what insiders call the slimmed monarchy plan, which would, by definition, reduce the number of working royals and eliminate the positions that would have been occupied by Harry and Meghan had they stayed. In practical terms, this means that the role Meghan and Harry walked away from is not just being left empty, it is being actively replaced, restructured, and in some cases, eliminated entirely. The message, according to Morgan, is unmistakably clear. There is no road back, not because of personal animosity, but because the road itself has been taken up. Second, Piers Morgan has highlighted the strategy around royal titles. Now, this is a subject that has been debated endlessly. Can William strip Harry and Meghan of their Sussex titles when he becomes king? The legal answer is complicated, but the political and strategic answer, according to Morgan, is that William doesn't necessarily need to strip the titles dramatically and publicly. He can simply make those titles irrelevant. If the institution of the monarchy becomes so associated with William's vision, transparent, modern, service-oriented, slimmed down, and the Sussex brand becomes so associated with scandal, financial trouble, and controversy, then the title of Duke and Duchess of Sussex becomes, in the words of several royal observers, essentially worthless. Not because William took it away, but because the Sussexes devalued it themselves. That, Morgan says, is the move. It's not a battle. It's a slow, quiet checkmate. Third, Morgan has pointed to William's use of what royal observers are calling soft power. Rather than engaging in the war of words that Harry and Meghan seem to prefer, the memoir, the documentary, the podcast, the Netflix series, William has been quietly and consistently building relationships with international leaders, with environmental organizations, with charities, with the public. Not through glossy Netflix productions, but through actual presence, actual work, and actual results. Morgan has noted that while Meghan was learning how to make jam on camera for a lifestyle show that was quietly bleeding viewers by the week, William was on the ground in places that matter, doing things that cannot be faked for a camera. The contrast, Morgan says, speaks for itself. And then came the news that, even for those of us who have been watching this story for years, landed with an almost surreal thud. The IRS, the Internal Revenue Service of the United States, had reportedly launched a formal investigation into Archewell Foundation. For those of you who are not familiar with Archewell, it is the non-profit charitable organization that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle established after leaving the royal family. It was presented as their philanthropic legacy, the vehicle through which they would do their most meaningful work, the thing that would justify the sacrifice of leaving everything behind. It was named after the Greek word archi, meaning source of action, and it was supposed to be a beacon of modern, progressive, transparent philanthropy. Instead, it has become, in the words of the charity watchdog organization Charity Watch, a case study in opacity, mismanagement, and financial red flags. Let's walk through exactly what the records show, because the numbers are genuinely startling. According to Archewell's own IRS Form 990 filing for fiscal year 2024, the organization raised approximately $2.1 million in contributions and grants. That might sound like a reasonable amount for a mid-sized charity, except that the organization spent $5.1 million in total expenses during the same period. Let me say that again because it bears repeating. Archewell raised $2 million and spent $5 million. That is not a charity operating efficiently. That is a charity hemorrhaging money. It ended the year with net assets of approximately $8.3 million, money left over from earlier years, but the trajectory is unmistakably downward, and the rate of burn is genuinely alarming. But the financial figures are only part of the problem. The deeper issue, according to both Charity Watch and independent investigative reporting, is transparency. Archewell has consistently struggled to provide the kind of clear, accountable documentation that legitimate nonprofits are expected to maintain. The organization has faced repeated criticism for vague reporting on how money is actually being spent, who is benefiting from the foundation's programs, and whether the charitable activities are proportionate to the administrative overhead. Charity Watch, which rates charities on a scale from A to F based on financial efficiency and transparency, has been scathing in its assessments. The organization eviscerated Archewell's lack of accountability in a report that pulled no punches, pointing to the fact that the foundation spent more than twice what it raised in 2024, and yet, somehow, the public narrative around the foundation remained largely positive. Then came the rebrand. In late 2025, Archewell Foundation quietly changed its name to Archewell Philanthropies. Now, from the outside, a name change might seem innocuous. Organizations rebrand all the time. But the timing and context of this particular rebrand raised immediate red flags. Why rebrand at the exact moment that the organization is under increased financial scrutiny? Why change the name just as investigative journalists and charity watchdogs were beginning to ask pointed questions about the foundation's finances? The answer, according to several observers, is unfortunately obvious. A name change doesn't erase a paper trail, but it can muddy it. It can create enough confusion for donors, for regulators, for the public to buy time. Charity Watch was not fooled. In a blunt blog post titled Archewell Philanthropies, New name, same old transparency problems. The organization made clear that the rebrand had solved exactly nothing. The same issues remained. The same questions were unanswered. And now there was the added insult of a rebrand that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. And then there were the staffing implosions. Multiple reports have confirmed that Archewell cut approximately 60% of its workforce during this period. The most significant departure was that of James Holt, described by Page 6 as a key figure and one of the most important operational leaders in the Sussex organization. When an organization loses 60% of its staff and its top leadership simultaneously, it is not restructuring. It is collapsing. And the ripple effects of that collapse were felt across every aspect of the Sussex operation, from the foundation's charitable work to the management of Meghan's personal brand to the handling of the Netflix relationship. It was, by any reasonable measure, an institution in freefall. The IRS investigation, whether formally confirmed or still in the investigative stage, represents the most serious institutional challenge the Sussexes have faced since leaving the royal family. Unlike tabloid headlines or critical documentaries, an IRS probe carries legal weight. It has consequences. It requires responses, documentation, and accountability. And it brings with it the kind of scrutiny that neither Harry nor Meghan has ever had to face. Not from the press, not from the palace, not from anyone. The IRS does not care about narrative. It does not care about documentary films or emotional interviews. It cares about numbers, and right now, the numbers around Archewell are not telling a flattering story. Now, let's turn to Hollywood, because even as the charity scandal was developing, the entertainment empire that Harry and Meghan had built on the back of their royal identities was simultaneously beginning to crack in ways that even the most optimistic Sussex supporter would find difficult to explain away. When Harry and Meghan signed their original deal with Netflix, it was valued at $100 million. $100 million. For context, that is the kind of deal that the most commercially successful, proven entertainers in the world command. It is the kind of deal Netflix signs with people who have decade-long track records of delivering audiences and generating buzz. Harry and Meghan had none of that, but what they had, Netflix clearly believed, was something more valuable. The global fascination with the royal family, a story that had never been fully told from the inside, and two individuals who seemed ready to tell it. The deal made sense in 2020, when the memory of their dramatic departure from the royal family was fresh, when the world was genuinely curious about what they would say and do next, and when the Sussex brand was at the absolute peak of its celebrity power. But 5 years is a long time in the attention economy. And 5 years of Netflix productions later, the Harry and Meghan documentary series, Heart of Invictus, and ultimately with Love, Meghan, the results were decidedly mixed. The Harry and Meghan documentary series did generate significant viewership in its opening weeks, driven almost entirely by the novelty of hearing the couple speak so candidly about the royal family. But even that viewership came with a significant caveat. It was largely negative in its reception. Critics were unimpressed. The public narrative that emerged was not the sympathetic portrayal the couple had hoped for, but rather a story of two people who seemed more focused on grievances than on building anything new. Heart of Invictus, which followed disabled veterans competing in the Invictus Games, was received more warmly, but it barely registered in Netflix's viewership charts. And then came With Love, Meghan. This was Meghan's solo project, a lifestyle show in which she cooked, gardened, entertained, and generally presented herself as a kind of modern domestic goddess crossed with a progressive community builder. The show was promoted heavily. Meghan appeared on multiple platforms to talk about it. There was genuine pre-launch buzz. And then it premiered. And then the ratings came in. And they were, by virtually every measure, catastrophic. According to reports from Deadline and other entertainment industry publications, With Love, Meghan failed to crack the top 300 shows on Netflix, not just for a week, not just in a particular market, but consistently across its entire run. For a show on the world's largest streaming platform, featuring one of the most recognizable women on the planet, this is not just underperformance. This is a statement. It is the audience delivering a verdict in the most honest language available to them by simply not watching. Piers Morgan's reaction to all of this was, as you might expect, both sharp and unsympathetic. Morgan had famously called the show unwatchable, a description that, in light of the ratings, seems less like a personal opinion and more like an accurate consumer report. But Morgan's commentary went beyond simple mockery. He has consistently argued that the fundamental problem with Meghan's entertainment ventures is one of authenticity, or rather, the lack of it. Audiences, Morgan has argued, are not stupid. They can tell the difference between someone who genuinely loves what they're doing and someone who is performing the role of someone who loves what they're doing. And in With Love, Meghan, even the most charitable viewer would struggle to find the authentic Meghan beneath the layers of careful staging and brand management. The Netflix deal, when it came time for renewal, was dramatically restructured. Gone was the $100 million contract. In its place came what the entertainment industry calls a first-look deal, a much more modest arrangement that essentially gives Netflix the right of first refusal on any projects the Sussexes develop, but without the financial commitment or the prestige of the original contract. The Los Angeles Times confirmed the new arrangement in August 2025, describing it as much less extensive than the earlier agreement. The New York Times was similarly clear. The new deal represented a significant step down. Multiple entertainment industry reports confirmed that the original $100 million deal was definitively dead. Piers Morgan, in his inimitable style, publicly mocked the new arrangement, pointing out the irony of a couple who had positioned themselves as Hollywood royalty now clinging to a consolation prize deal that most mid-level content creators would find modest. But perhaps the most absurd and yet symbolically perfect image to emerge from the entire Netflix saga was the story of the jam. Meghan Markle, as part of her With Love, Meghan brand and her associated lifestyle label as ever, had launched a range of products including jam, tea, and candles. These products were supposed to be the tangible, purchasable extension of the Meghan lifestyle brand, a way for fans to bring a piece of the Sussex aesthetic into their homes. And at $14 a jar, the jam was positioned as a premium product for a discerning consumer. What actually happened was rather different. According to a Page 6 report that went viral in early 2026, Netflix's Los Angeles offices were, at that point, effectively overflowing with unsold as ever products. 2 entire storage rooms had been filled with Meghan's jam, candles, and tea, products that had not sold and were now sitting in a streaming giants building gathering dust. Netflix staff were reportedly helping themselves to free jars of jam. The products were being, in the words of Page 6 sources, literally given away. The warehouse had backed up. The brand, which was supposed to represent Meghan's triumphant reinvention as a lifestyle entrepreneur, had become a punchline. And Meghan, according to those same sources, was privately furious, insisting that sales had validated the brand even as the evidence told a very different story. There is a particular kind of tragedy in this image, if you're inclined to be sympathetic, which many of Meghan's critics are not. Here is a woman who walked away from the most institution-backed platform in the world, who gave up the title, the protection, the infrastructure, and the global credibility that comes with being a working member of the British royal family, and she did it, at least in part, on the promise of building something of her own. A platform that was hers. A brand that she controlled. An identity that wasn't defined by someone else's rules. And yet, the jam is piling up in a Netflix storage room. The show got cancelled. The deal got cut, and the IRS is asking questions about the charity that was supposed to be the heart of her legacy. The dream, whatever it was, looks very different from the reality. And this is where Prince William re-enters the picture. Because through all of this, the Netflix drama, the Archewell probe, the brand collapse, the staff exodus, William has been doing something remarkable in its simplicity. He's been showing up. Not for cameras. Not for Netflix specials. Not for glossy magazine profiles about his jam-making process. He has been showing up for the actual work of the actual monarchy. He has been present at state events. He has been traveling on behalf of the crown. He has been building the relationships and executing the duties that have defined the British royal family for centuries. And in doing so, he has made the contrast with his brother and sister-in-law impossible to ignore. Royal insiders who have spoken to multiple publications describe William's approach to the Sussex situation as one of conscious, deliberate patience. He does not, sources say, take any particular pleasure in watching Harry and Meghan struggle. He is not, according to those who know him, sitting in Kensington Palace rubbing his hands together at every new Sussex scandal. What he is doing, according to those same sources, is far more strategic. He is making decisions about the future of the monarchy, decisions about its structure, its focus, its values, that happen to be incompatible with everything the Sussexes represent. Not because he designed them to be incompatible, but because the monarchy William is building is one defined by service, restraint, and institutional loyalty, and those are precisely the values that Harry and Meghan rejected when they left. The slimmed monarchy concept is central to this. King Charles III, even before his health challenges, had spoken about wanting a monarchy that was leaner and more focused, fewer working royals, tighter budgets, and a clearer definition of what it means to serve the crown. William, in his own planning for his eventual reign, has reportedly embraced and extended this vision. Sources quoted in multiple royal publications describe William as wanting a monarchy centered on a small, tightly focused group of working royals, himself and Catherine, their children, and perhaps a handful of others. This vision explicitly has no room for Harry and Meghan, not because of personal animosity, but because of professional incompatibility. The Sussexes have publicly and repeatedly made clear that they do not intend to return to royal duties. William's vision of the monarchy simply takes them at their word. What Piers Morgan has been most insightful about, in his ongoing commentary on this situation, is the title question. For years, commentators have asked, will William strip Harry and Meghan of their titles? It is a question that generates enormous heat, but perhaps less light than it should, because it assumes that the titles are what matter most. Morgan's argument, and it is a compelling one, is that the titles matter only insofar as the institution behind them has credibility and relevance. If William successfully rebuilds the monarchy as a modern, respected, service-oriented institution, the Sussex titles become vestigial, relics of a past that neither Harry nor Meghan seems to want to fully claim. They cannot fully claim the Sussex title while simultaneously attacking the institution from which that title derives its meaning. And the longer they continue to attack that institution, the more the title erodes, not by royal decree, but by the couple's own actions. Morgan has also pointed to a specific legal and procedural avenue that William could pursue when he becomes king: letters patent, which are royal instruments that can be used to modify the terms of royal appointments and honors. Reports in late 2025 confirmed that the machinery for this kind of action already exists, and that William's advisors are well aware of it. The strategic question is not whether it can be done, but whether it needs to be done. Morgan's assessment is that by the time William ascends to the throne, whether that is years or decades away, the Sussex brand may have eroded to the point where the formal stripping of titles is unnecessary. The market will have done the work for him. But let's step back for a moment and ask a harder question, the one that most royal commentary avoids because it's uncomfortable. Is any of this entirely fair? Harry and Meghan made choices that were, by any reasonable assessment, deeply consequential and deeply damaging to the institution they left. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the memoir Spare. Each of these was a deliberate act of public warfare against an institution and a family, and the damage was real. But it is also true that the couple has faced a level of hostile scrutiny that few public figures have ever experienced, much of it racially charged, much of it disproportionate, and much of it driven not by genuine concern for the monarchy, but by tabloid entertainment. Piers Morgan himself has not been free of criticism on this front. His personal vendetta against Meghan, dating back to a reported incident years ago, has colored his commentary in ways that even his admirers sometimes acknowledge. He is not an entirely disinterested observer. What is interesting, though, is that the most damaging facts about the Sussex situation right now are not coming from Piers Morgan. They're not coming from royal critics or tabloid journalists with axes to grind. They're coming from IRS Form 990 filings, from Netflix viewership data, from Charity Watch reports, from page 6 sources inside Netflix's own offices. The story is telling itself. And that, in many ways, is the most powerful argument for William's approach. He doesn't have to say anything. He doesn't have to do anything dramatic. He just has to let reality speak. And right now, reality is being very, very loud. The rebrand of Archewell from Foundation to Philanthropies deserves a bit more attention because it is genuinely revealing about the couple's strategic instincts in a crisis. When an organization is under scrutiny, when journalists and regulators are asking pointed questions, the smart move is transparency. Open the books. Invite the audit. Address the criticisms directly and with specific evidence. The move that signals panic, on the other hand, is rebranding. Because a rebrand communicates loudly and clearly that the people running the organization are more focused on managing perception than on solving the underlying problems. Charity Watch saw through it immediately. So did the investigative journalists who had been tracking Archewell's finances. And so, frankly, did anyone who had been paying attention. The staff numbers are equally telling. When 60% of your workforce leaves an organization, and when the departures include your most senior operational leaders, it does not happen because of ordinary restructuring. Organizations restructure all the time, but restructuring is orderly and planned. What happens at Archewell looks far more like people running for the exits before something falls. The departure of James Holt, in particular, was significant. As the head of Archewell's day-to-day operations, Holt was the person most directly responsible for holding the organization together. His departure left a vacuum at exactly the moment when the organization most needed strong, experienced leadership. And the vacuum has not, by most accounts, been filled. There is also the question of what Archewell was actually doing with its money. The Form 990 filing tells a story, but it raises more questions than it answers. When an organization spends $5 million but raises only $2 million, the natural question is, where is the money going? Administrative costs? Executive salaries? Events and programming that benefit the organization's public image more than its stated charitable beneficiaries? The filing provides some answers, but not enough, and the vagueness of those answers is precisely what has drawn the scrutiny of investigators. A legitimate charity with nothing to hide does not require a rebrand and a staff purge. It provides the answers. Meanwhile, back in the entertainment world, the fallout from the Netflix situation continues to ripple outward. The original $100 million deal was not just financially significant, it was symbolically significant. It was the thing that made the Sussex departure from the royal family seem, at least on paper, like a viable commercial proposition. If you can walk away from being a working royal and immediately land a 9-figure entertainment deal, then the narrative of brave self-determination is at least financially coherent. But when that deal is quietly restructured into something much smaller, and when the shows produced under that deal fail to find audiences, and when your jam is being given away for free in a corporate storage room, the narrative of brave self-determination starts to look a lot more like a miscalculation. Piers Morgan, to his credit, identified this risk very early. He argued consistently, from the moment the Netflix deal was announced, that Harry and Meghan's commercial appeal was almost entirely dependent on their connection to the royal family, and that connection, once severed, would depreciate rapidly. The royal family is interesting precisely because of its history, its tradition, and its institutional weight. A duke and duchess are interesting people. Two people who used to be a duke and duchess, who have publicly attacked the institution from which those titles derive, are considerably less interesting, at least to the mainstream audience that makes streaming numbers move. Morgan was, in this assessment, essentially correct. The audience that wanted to watch with love, Meghan, was always going to be smaller than Netflix needed to justify the investment. And the audience that wanted to keep watching once the novelty wore off turned out to be smaller still. The As Ever brand, which was Meghan's pivot from entertainment to lifestyle entrepreneurship, was another attempt to build something independent of the royal connection. And in theory, it was not a bad idea. There is a genuine market for premium lifestyle brands. There are consumers who would buy jam, tea, and candles from a brand associated with a beautiful, aspirational celebrity lifestyle. But the execution, from the product quality concerns to the pricing strategy to the marketing approach, did not, by most accounts, match the ambition. And the unsold inventory piling up in Netflix's storage rooms is the most concrete possible evidence of the gap between the brand's self-perception and market reality. It is worth noting, in all of this, that Prince Harry himself has been largely absent from the public narrative in recent months. This is itself a significant development. The man who wrote a 416-page memoir about his life and grievances, who gave multiple interviews in which he made explosive claims about his family, who appeared in a Netflix documentary that seemed designed to permanently reframe the royal family's public image, that man has been conspicuously, almost eerily quiet. Some observers attribute this to a deliberate strategic recalibration. Others suggest it reflects a deeper disillusionment with the entire Sussex project. And some, particularly those with sources inside the Sussex circle, have suggested that the relationship between Harry and Meghan has become strained under the weight of their combined setbacks, though those reports are, at this stage, difficult to confirm. What is clear is that the Sussex project, the grand post-royal enterprise that was supposed to demonstrate that you could walk away from the crown and build something bigger and better, is not going according to plan. The charitable arm is under federal investigation. The entertainment empire has been dramatically scaled back. The lifestyle brand is struggling. The staff has largely gone. And the public narrative, which Harry and Meghan fought so hard to control, has slipped out of their hands again. Not because William said anything, not because the palace leaked anything, but simply because the facts keep accumulating in an unflattering direction. And this brings us back to Piers Morgan and to the specific insight that has made his commentary on this situation so persistently compelling even to people who dislike him. Morgan has argued, from very early in the story, that the fundamental strategic error the Sussexes made was not leaving the royal family. People leave institutions all the time, and it can be done with dignity and even admiration. The error, Morgan has argued, was the manner of the leaving. By not just departing but actively attacking, by framing every interview, every documentary, and every memoir as an indictment of the institution they left, Harry and Meghan created a situation in which their success would forever be perceived as a referendum on the royal family, and their failure would be perceived as a vindication of it. It was a trap of their own making, and they walked into it willingly. If, with Love, Meghan had been a massive hit, if it had topped Netflix charts, generated genuine cultural conversation, and established Meghan as a bona fide lifestyle brand powerhouse, then the narrative would have been, see, they were right to leave, they're thriving, the monarchy is the past. But instead, the show failed. The deal shrank, the jam piled up, and the narrative has become, see, without the royal brand, they have nothing. Whether or not that narrative is entirely fair is a separate question. But it is the narrative that is currently dominating, and it is the one that William, without saying a single public word, has been perfectly positioned to benefit from. The question now is, what happens next? There are a few scenarios that observers are tracking carefully. The first is that the IRS investigation resolves without major consequences, that the Archewell financial situation, while genuinely problematic, does not rise to the level of formal legal action. In this scenario, Archewell Philanthropies would likely continue in a significantly diminished form, focusing on a narrower set of programs with a smaller budget and a more modest public profile. The Sussex brand would survive, but in a much reduced capacity. This is probably the most likely outcome based on current evidence. IRS investigations of charities frequently conclude without criminal charges, particularly when the issues are administrative rather than criminal. The second scenario is more serious, that the investigation uncovers evidence of intentional misrepresentation or misuse of charitable funds. This would be a genuinely catastrophic outcome for the Sussexes, not just reputationally, but legally. It would expose them to potential penalties, potential litigation, and the kind of sustained negative coverage that would make everything they have experienced so far look mild by comparison. This scenario seems less likely based on current evidence, but it cannot be entirely discounted. The third scenario involves the Netflix relationship. The current first-look deal is a far cry from the original arrangement, but it does represent a continuing commercial relationship. If Meghan or Harry can develop a project that genuinely captures audience attention, something authentic, something that connects with viewers on an emotional level rather than just trading on royal nostalgia. The relationship could be rebuilt. This seems genuinely possible, though it would require a significant change in approach from both parties. And the fourth scenario, the most transformative, involves some form of reconciliation with the royal family. This has been discussed, speculated about, and dismissed repeatedly over the past several years, and the current state of affairs does not make it look particularly imminent. But it is not impossible. The births of Harry and Meghan's children, Archie and Lilibet, have given William and Harry a connection that persists beyond their personal and professional disagreements. The health challenges faced by both King Charles and Princess Catherine in recent years have reportedly reminded Harry of the fragility of time and family bonds. And William himself, according to insiders, has not closed the door entirely, though he has made clear that any reconciliation would need to be on very specific terms that would require the Sussexes to commit to a level of discretion about private royal matters that they have not demonstrated so far. What Piers Morgan's commentary ultimately illuminates, when you strip away the personality and the provocation, is a very old truth about power and institutions. The British monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years. It has survived beheadings and abdications, world wars and social revolutions, the decline of empire and the rise of social media. It has survived because it is, at its core, an institution that is bigger than any individual within it. Harry and Meghan bet that their individual star power was greater than the institutional weight of the crown. William, whether consciously or instinctively, has bet the other way, that the crown is bigger than any individual, including himself, and that his job is to serve it rather than bend it to his personal narrative. The evidence of 2025 and 2026 suggests that William has bet correctly. The IRS probe is not a small thing. The Netflix collapse is not a small thing. The storage rooms full of unsold jam are, in the grand scheme of history, a small and somewhat absurd thing, but as a symbol, as an image, as a way of understanding where the Sussex project has arrived, they are almost perfectly chosen. Here is the dream of the post-royal, self-determined, Hollywood-adjacent lifestyle brand. 2 rooms full of $14 jars that nobody wants, being given away for free to Netflix employees who probably don't even need more jam. There will be those who watch this story and feel genuine sympathy for Meghan and Harry. There will be those who feel that the system, the media, the monarchy, the British establishment, has been determined from the beginning to see them fail, and that the failures being chronicled so gleefully by figures like Piers Morgan are less about the couple's actual shortcomings and more about the world's determination to punish them for leaving. That argument is not without merit. The coverage of Meghan in particular has been, at times, undeniably cruel and undeniably tinged with something uglier than legitimate criticism. The racism in the tabloid treatment of Meghan is well documented and real. But the IRS Form 990 is not a tabloid. The Netflix viewership data is not a racist newspaper. The storage rooms full of unsold jam are not a palace conspiracy. These are facts, numbers, records, observable realities, and they tell a story that no amount of narrative management can fully rewrite. The Sussex project, in its current form, is not working. The charity is under scrutiny it cannot explain. The entertainment empire has shrunk. The brand is struggling. And the man who is supposed to be their great foil, the rigid, institutional, duty-bound Prince William, is quietly, patiently, effectively doing exactly what a future king is supposed to do. Piers Morgan sees all of this clearly. You might not like how he says it. You might find his delivery obnoxious, his history with Meghan too personal, his commentary too often sliding from insight into score settling. But the substance of what he's saying, that William has been playing a long game, that the game is working, that the Sussexes have consistently misread the board, is harder and harder to argue with as the evidence accumulates. So where does this leave us? It leaves us watching one of the most extraordinary public stories of our time, a story about identity, power, race, privilege, family, ambition, and the limits of self-invention, reach what appears to be a genuinely dramatic inflection point. The IRS probe could define the next chapter of the Archewell story. The Netflix situation could evolve in unexpected directions. The royal family could face new crises that reshape the entire landscape. Harry and Meghan could, against all current expectations, find a project or a platform that genuinely resonates and begins to rebuild what has been lost. But right now, in this moment, the scoreboard reads, William, playing chess, collecting wins, building quietly. Harry and Meghan, navigating an IRS probe, a scaled-back Netflix deal, storage rooms full of jam, and a charity that spent more than twice what it raised. And Piers Morgan, standing at the sidelines of all of this, saying exactly what everyone is thinking, but most people are too polite to say out loud. The game is not over. The board is not finished. But the pieces are arranged in a way that, right now, tells a very clear story. And that story is one that Prince William, quiet, strategic, patient, deliberate, is very much controlling. If you made it this far, genuinely, thank you. This is the kind of story that deserves to be told in full, with every detail, every number, every irony intact. Because the headline version, Meghan in trouble, William winning, doesn't do justice to the complexity of what's happening. The reality is messier, more human, and more interesting than any headline can capture. We'll keep watching. We'll keep reporting. And we'll keep asking the hard questions about the monarchy, about celebrity, about race and power, and what it means to build a legacy in public life. Subscribe if you want to stay with this story as it develops. Hit the notification bell. Share this video if you think someone in your life needs to hear all of this laid out in full. And leave a comment below, because I genuinely want to know, do you think Harry and Meghan can turn this around? Or is the chess game already over?